Just a reminder, you can catch me recording this podcast live on AMP. AMP is a new live radio app that lets you call in and chat with me in person while recording. Get the app on Apple's App Store and make sure you follow me at John Middlekauff to get notified when I go live. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out Podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to a podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, smash that like button. Subscribe to the Volumes YouTube page. Leave a comment below. Coming up, former Georgia quarterback, all-time SEC touchdown leader, and fellow Volume podcaster, Aaron Murray. We talk all things football, but first, go to your smartphone, go to your app store, and download the fastest growing ticketing app in America, who happens to be the official ticketing app of this podcast, Gametime. You can go to any football games this fall, baseball games this summer. See Cincinnati, Dela Cruz, play after play after play. A guy looks incredible. Wherever you live, any sporting event you want to go to, or concerts, you want to go to a concert this summer, comedy shows, they got you covered. Type in the promo code JOHN, promo code John, to get $20 off your first pair of tickets. First-time users, promo code John, $20 off. Use that promo code, Gametime. Download the app right now. Okay, we have a special guest, a colleague, host of Snaps on the Volume. You can see him calling SEC football games on ESPN, the SEC network. You can just find him all around. I have to validate this with him, but the all-time leading touchdown passer in Georgia history, not a bad stat to have, especially the last couple years. Aaron Murray.
Just to correct your SEC history.
Okay, my bad. I was going to roll that one back. Aaron Murray, what's up?
Hopefully for a lot longer. This damn quarterback at Mississippi State got the benefit of playing in some air raid offense where they throw the ball from the 1 yard line for the past few years. So we'll see if he can take me down here the next year or two. But yeah, well, records are meant to be broken. That's why I'm still ticked off. I don't got a damn ring on my finger.
It's funny for those of us on the West Coast. I mean, SC football is pretty big. UCLA basketball's had some moments, but the SEC, even the Big Ten to an extent, but the SEC's been on another level. I know you didn't win a national championship. You've been in the SEC championship game. Now that they're champions again, first time, I guess they've done it back-to-back now since 1980. Do you pay for anything when you go to town? I mean, did you get lumped into that, or have you not been paying for anything for 15 years?
I get taken care of a lot of times, which is great. It's not as well as Stetson. I tell you what, Stetson, winning back-to-back natties at the quarterback position, I don't think he's going to have to pay for anything, not only in Athens, but probably the state of Georgia. So, he better, apply for, I guess you can't apply for Augusta, but you can somewhat hit, maybe he'll get that Augusta membership, Peachtree here in Atlanta, like all the top golf courses, he needs to start figuring out ways to become a member at, which will be good. He can use some of that NIL money here last year to pay for those memberships. But yeah, listen, there's a reason why I'm from Florida. I grew up in Tampa. I love Tampa. I miss it. I miss the weather all year long, but I would be an absolute idiot to leave the state of Georgia. And that's what I kind of tell all the kids that go to UGA. I was like, man, if you do right on the football field, in the community, like once a dog, always a dog. Like the people of this state will take care of you, which is awesome, which is also why I currently live in Atlanta and absolutely love it.
I remember a couple of years ago, I got a buddy that scouts the SEC, and obviously you go through Alabama, so he knew Kirby pretty well. And he said early on in Kirby's tenure, he's like, listen, I don't pretend to be 24/7 high school sports rivals guy, but it's pretty clear that Georgia has, even when you talk to these college coaches, this was like 3 or 4 years ago, was going to have an incredible couple high school classes. And he's like, Kirby's going to clean up on this, and you better watch out. And it has clearly come to fruition because you guys were always really good, right? Your team's ton of NFL players. It feels like he's equaled now Alabama top to bottom talent, or some of those Urban Meyer Florida teams where it's just like the season starts and they are on 1 or 2, not like could win the national championship, like should win the national championship.
Well, there's no real in-state threat. Georgia Tech's not a threat. Just we can all be real about that one. Like if you're a kid worth its salt here in the state of Georgia and is a big time recruit, you probably grew up a Georgia fan and you probably want to go to Georgia. So if Kirby comes in his helicopter and flies in the 50-yard line of your high school field and says, "Hey, here's your offer from the University of Georgia," 9 out of 10 times you're probably going to take it. Alabama still recruits at a high level, but obviously you do have Auburn there that may, contend. And I wouldn't say that the talent is not as good in the state of Alabama as is in Georgia. Obviously, Florida, you got Florida State, you got Miami, you got everyone and their brother that wants to go to Florida recruit. LSU's kind of in the same path. I would say Louisiana, those kids who grew up in Louisiana want to go to LSU, which is why I think Brian Kelly's in a great spot to obviously have success year one and then continue to have success there in Baton Rouge. But, Georgia, like I said, Georgia's in a unique spot. They're probably top 3, 4 when it comes to high school talent. And they don't have the competition to really compete in state to get these top recruits. So Kirby's in a great spot. And, I also tell a lot of people this, when it comes to a checklist of when Kirby's selling Georgia to mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, or the recruit, facilities, top 5 in the country. When it comes to campus life, downtown life, kind of enjoying yourself. For those who've never been to Athens, Georgia, it is absolutely incredible. You look at all ratings for college experiences, it's one of the top ones out there. Academics, it's number 3 in the SEC behind Florida and Vanderbilt. You're an hour away from Atlanta, Georgia, one of the biggest markets here in the Southeast. NIL opportunities are through the roof as well. So like you check off every single box. Oh, now you win championships and you got championship trophies. And then also Kirby's putting guys in the first round just as well as Nick Saban is. So you get the full experience at Georgia. And this is why when Kirby took the job back in 2016, Nick Saban said it, man, like Georgia's a sleeping giant. You get the full experience and treatment when you come to the University of Georgia, which is why I think Kirby's got this thing going in a direction where I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Well, it feels like there are 4 schools, correct me if I'm wrong, that if you get the right coach, it's on like Donkey Kong. That's Alabama, LSU, Florida, and Georgia. And Georgia's proven that. Florida's proven that before. Saban's proven it. Alabama and LSU obviously has won 3 championships in the last 3 decades with 3 different coaches. The thing with Kirby, you have a unique experience because you went up against him as a player, right? And as Alabama was really shooting like a rocket ship. Your relationship of just knowing him from afar, obviously coaches in the SEC, even assistant ones, are so famous. All the players and coaches know each other. They all recruit each other. To now getting to know him when he first got the job and what you've seen, like, have you seen the guy change? Do you know him well? Like, what's your take on him throughout the years?
Oh, he hasn't changed. He's a little pit bull. He's got that fire in his belly. I don't know how he does it. I really don't. Honestly, I don't know how any of these coaches do it. I mean, it's a grind, and you really don't realize it as a college player because like you wake up, you go to school, you get to the facility a little after lunch, you go to meetings, you go to practice, and then you go home and hang out with your boys and play video games. Like you don't really see the day-to-day grind of these coaches. I really didn't realize the day-to-day grind until I got to the NFL and I'm in my meetings with Matt Nagy, who was the quarterback coach in Kansas City, and before our 7:30 meetings, he's FaceTiming his kids at 7 o'clock as they get up. And really his only time he got to see his kids during the week was 7 o'clock in the morning when they were getting up before school, and probably another FaceTime before they went to bed at night because they're there from 5:30 to 11 o'clock at night. And now you do that for a college coach, same time, but then you throw in recruiting where these guys are on the road. So, and it's literally, 7 days a week, you're in the office 16 to 20 hours. And then off season, you're on the recruiting. I mean, you maybe get 2-3 weeks off the year where you get to hang out with your family and relax a little bit. But even then, man, I remember one of my teammates, Christian Robinson, who is now the linebacker coach at Baylor. We're on his bachelor party 2 years ago. I mean, this is the middle of summer, bachelor party. We're having a good time. He gets a call from a top recruit. And he's like, I got to go take this call. He's on a call with a top recruit for 30, 45 minutes. The kid calling him during his time. He's supposed to be taken off, but you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
You can't,
you hang
can't
up?
mute it. Yeah. Because that kid's then going to go call the coach at some other school and he's going to pick up the phone and he's going to say, well, Christian blew me off. This guy didn't. So like it is all year long. These guys got to be on. And, so I kind of lump all these coaches, but Kirby is to even more the extreme. I mean, he is a absolute dog when it comes to recruiting. Obviously he learned it from Nick Saban, but I mean, he is relentless when it comes to that, of just always on the road, always in his plane, always in the helicopter, always on the phone, always bringing recruits in. After they won the first national championship, I'm down the field, saying congratulations, yada yada yada. And he's like, man, I got to go hang out with these recruits. You just won a natty the first time in 40 years, and he wasn't celebrating; he was recruiting. That is his life. That is his grind. So he's young, so he's got the energy to do it. I just wonder, man, like at some point there has to be some sort of fatigue factor, unless he's taking some magic pill that gives him, enough energy to keep up with it.
Well, I knew someone that had worked for Belichick and worked with Saban and said both those guys have something in common. Like when the season, whenever that is, in the NFL, it's usually training camp and basically runs all the way through the draft. In college, it's kind of changed over the years with recruiting cycles, but there's like a football treadmill and it doesn't go like 9.0. It goes like 4.5 or whatever. And Bill and Nick can just consistently go the entire time until it ends. And after, Kirby saw it with Nick, I heard a story. I knew Jim McElwain, who was the offensive coordinator on their first national championship team. After they won that first national championship of the Saban dynasty, he looks at everyone like, I don't know, after the celebration or maybe even before, like, we got a recruiting meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. And everyone looked at each other like, is this guy, he was dead. They had the meeting the next day. And obviously Kirby does it a little differently. And I've heard there's a little bit of a rivalry. They may not, and it's just natural when you become Nick's competition. And that's Nick's thing, right? He likes you and he loved Kirby. Kirby's his greatest protege, right? I mean, he's proven to be, he's going to carry on Nick's legacy in a way, but he's starting to beat him. So Nick's not going to like that.
No. And obviously Nick last year, we always wonder, like, when is the end for Nick Saban? Like at some point, he's 71, maybe 72 this year, somewhere in the early 70s. And college football is changing. And there's always the thought of, can you, the saying of can you teach an old dog new tricks? Like, can Nick continue to evolve with the new SEC, expanded playoffs, this NIL world, which is a complete headache right now? Like, does he have the energy to do it? And he proved it last year. He still does. Number one recruiting class, probably the best recruiting class that he's ever put together, which says something because they've been number one, a handful of times since he took over, back in the mid 2000s there. So, he's still got the dog in him. He's still got the fight in him. T-Bob and I kind of kicked this around on our show on Snaps, of how much longer. Two things. Will Nick ever win another natty? And over under 4 years left of coaching, or 4.5 years. So, will he coach 5 more years? I don't think he coaches another 5 years. And I don't know if he wins another national championship either, because I don't think it's going to happen this year. I think it's going to be more and more difficult to win a national championship because of this new format. And, all of a sudden you start to see Nick Saban, who has dominated the sport for so long, slowly start coming down that mountain of, he's already lost, hasn't won in 2 years, which is rare for them. You don't win again this year, which I don't think they have the team to do it. Then you don't win again next year. All of a sudden it's 4 years in a row, and people start questioning, like, okay, is that truly the last time that we've seen Nick win a few years ago? So I would say he makes it another 4 or 5 years. And I just don't know if we see him win another national championship, though.
Well, did you do LSU spring game?
I did do LSU spring game.
And I remember, I think on Twitter, you posted like a picture and like, they're my pick to win it. Like, you came away really impressed. Obviously nothing's probably changed since then. So you're even acting like you don't even think Nick's the favorite to win the West.
Not this. LSU would have the difference between LSU and Alabama this year is Alabama has more depth. They're too deep, which is just them recruiting at a high level for a long time. LSU is built depth this offseason. They've done a great job in the portal. They've done a great job recruiting, but it's not to the level of Alabama. But if you would ask me today, if you just want to compare starter versus starter, LSU has more. I would say if you did a whole point category, LSU would get more points for me than Alabama if we want to break it down, and especially the big time areas. I think they're better at quarterback. I think with their transfer running back they have in there, which is kind of a coin flip, I think they got better tackles. I think they got better receivers. They got a better tight end. Offensively, they're better, and they got the quarterback. That's the big hiccup. This, like in today's game, you need a QB. And right now for Alabama, we don't know who that quarterback's going to be. And I can tell you one thing, it's whoever it is of those three guys they have on the roster right now, it's not going to be to the same level as Jaden Daniels is. So then you look at LSU on defense. They got Mason Smith back at defensive tackle, who's probably going to be a first rounder. They got Harold Perkins, the best linebacker in the country. Like position by position, starter wise, LSU is as talented as anyone in the country. It's the two deep. It's all of a sudden, if those starters get hurt at a couple key positions, they don't have the depth to compete. And the problem is you face Alabama at the end of the season. How healthy are you going to be by the time you go to Tuscaloosa? That's the only question. But if LSU's healthy, they're the better football team this year. And I think Brian Kelly is one of the best coaches in America. You give him another year of recruiting, they're going to have a top 5 class. They're going to hit the portal well. All of a sudden, you're talking about 2024. They got momentum. They got one of the better coaches who's a little bit younger. And now all of a sudden, that gap of depth has significantly shrunken. So LSU's here to stay. Not saying that Kelly's going to always beat Nick Saban. I think this is going to be, just as good of a matchup, year in and year out, where it's kind of a coin flip kind of game. But I would say, yeah, right now, LSU healthy, LSU is a better football team this year.
I don't know. I would say obviously college football rosters as well as you, and I was at even a lot of college football casual fans, like when linemen transfer or safeties transfer. But the transferring of quarterbacks to me has been the coolest thing that's ever happened. I mean, a lot of guys like put you in, let's use you as an example, can just go to school and have a really good career and don't need to transfer. But I saw Jaden here at Arizona State, like he needed a change. Bo Nix needed a change. Penix had gotten hurt. And now we're talking about all these guys. I mean, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, these guys can potentially first-round picks if they have another good year. Jaden, if they win 11, 12 games and competing for a national championship, he's a big-time athlete, big-time arm.
Yep.
You were in the NFL. You saw like some guys just need a change of scenery, new scheme, new coach, new position coach. And it's a lot of people talk shit about it, but I really believe like it's had a lot of positive benefits for the sport, specifically with quarterbacks and kind of changing programs immediately.
Oh my God. Well, it's a key position. I mean, look at Sam Hartman. I had Missouri Wake Forest in the bowl game, and you kind of we knew heading into the game that was going to be his final game at Wake Forest, whether he would, go to the NFL or transfer. We weren't sure, but he needed a change. He'd been there, done everything he could. He kind of maxed out at Wake Forest. And all of a sudden he's going to be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame this year, who's going to be a really good football team who their missing piece. What was it? A quarterback. So like you can change your team, as you know, with just a quarterback. Look at Southern Cal, for goodness sakes. You get an average team.
For sure.
You get a brand new head coach and a quarterback, and all of a sudden you're a couple plays away from being in the playoffs. And now all of a sudden, to me, they're the favorites to win the Pac-12 this year. Like that's all you need. If you got a special quarterback and you get a couple pieces around him, you're a contender today. I mean, why was Alabama good last year? Bryce. You take Bryce off that team, and which is why I think Alabama struggles a little bit this year, because I'm not sure about the pieces around the quarterback. It's a 8-win team, 9-win team. I mean, that's the difference. So you look at quarterbacks nowadays, and it was weird because you did see a couple of Power 5 quarterbacks that were starters leaving. And you're kind of like, okay, is it NIL? Is it, the thought of winning a championship? I think a couple of guys made some mistakes leaving their spot, but whatever the reason is, or just change of scenery, it's good for them. I think you brought up Bo Nix. Bo, his last year at Auburn, because I covered him a few times, was great. He was a magician, man. He was a one-man band. He was making plays, running around, making defenders miss, extending plays, had no support from receivers. They actually fired the receiver coach middle of the season because that's how bad they were at the receiving position. And you're just like, man, if you put this guy in a team that has some support, there's something there. And all of a sudden he goes to Oregon and has a hell of a season. I think he's going to have a hell of a season again this year. So it's been fun to watch. It definitely makes the offseason a little bit more entertaining. And from a coach's perspective, do you want to risk bringing in a high school kid that may end up transferring anyways, or getting a guy, at a Power 5 school that's a proven commodity, bringing him in, plugging him in now, and all of a sudden your roster's improved day one? It's a fine balance. You never know what to do, but it's hard to pass up some of these guys that are at smaller schools, have balled out for a couple of years, that can come in and be your starter day one.
I kind of have a theory that over Nick Saban's tenure, which is like the lead boat that has brought this tide that's lifted up everyone, made the conference way better, which has bled down to basketball. Now your power. You guys have always been good at baseball, but now it's like you're hosting all these regionals. These golf teams are all flying private. That I remember a couple years ago being in Sacramento playing golf with this guy who's a farmer, and both of his kids, one went to Tennessee and one went to Ole Miss. And I hear more and more stories about kids that aren't going to like San Diego State or Arizona. They're leaving to go to the South.
Yeah.
Do you feel, I know you've lived in the South most of your life, but like the SEC has just become I don't know, much more cool. Like just like it's less regional now and more just like, shit, I'll go to Georgia, I'll go to Florida, and I'm from Arizona or I'm from Seattle or whatever.
Well, Bryce was from
not
California.
not even to I'm not even talking to play sports. I'm just talking to go to school. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I would say for a lot of the universities, I mean, academics have improved. I'm not going to say the academics are the same as some of the schools on the West Coast, but that is improved. I think more than anything, to me, the difference is the money and what they're putting into it and the resources and the coaches too. I mean, you brought up basketball for the SEC. What's been the big change for basketball over the past 5 years in the SEC? It starts with Sankey. Obviously, you have probably the most powerful voice in all of college sports in Greg Sankey. And he said, I want to be better in basketball. We got players in the Southeast to be a better basketball conference. We don't need these guys going to North Carolina and Duke or out to the West Coast. Yeah. Like, we need to keep them here in the SEC. So what do? Spent money on facilities, spent money on coaches. All of a sudden now you got elite coaches, elite facilities, and now these kids want to stay home and come to these schools. And all of a sudden now you're seeing, I mean, there's a handful of teams in the SEC tournament. Alabama was the number one team in the country for a while. Last year, Auburn was one of the number one teams in the country for a while. Obviously, Kentucky is one of the blue bloods out there. So from top to bottom, basketball has improved. Baseball is always going to be great. The women's sports is phenomenal. Basketball, you've had South Carolina and now LSU look as the top two teams in the country this year. Gymnastics has always been elite. Softball has always been one of the top schools. Now you add Oklahoma next year into the mix, who's been the predominant team in all of college sports when it comes to softball. Like, there isn't a sport now that the SEC can't say we're one of the top. I guess basketball, maybe you could say they're three, but besides men's basketball, and maybe that's even a good discussion too, we're one of the top one or two conferences in that sport in America. It's just they got more money to spend, and these kids want to go to places that have big fancy facilities that they know is going to put me in the best situations to excel in college and then possibly go to pro afterwards.
Obviously, from a money standpoint, Texas and Oklahoma only going to bring more cash with those two brands. But from an on-the-field standpoint, do you consider yourself one of those SEC elitists that just go, we are going to beat the shit out of these guys?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, if there's two teams that are ready to join the SEC, it would be Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, I know, Oklahoma had a little bit of a down year last year. You expect Venables to kind of get that ship going in the right direction. They had a good recruiting class. I'm a little bit more high.
He better, because he won't make it to the SEC with another season like that.
I think he still will. I think he will. I think they'll give him 3 years. You don't want to go into the SEC with a brand new coach either. It's kind of like, do you want to go into the SEC with a brand new coach? You fire that one, then you get a mass exodus of players in the transfer portal, and you're kind of limping into the SEC. It's like, I'd rather give him one opportunity. Give him that third year to build and then see what he could do before you make a decision. If anyone's on the hot seat, it's Sark. I think if Sark has a 7-8 win team this year, then you do question, okay, you've had the time and you can't have success your third year in the Big 12. What gives us any confidence you're going to have success in the SEC? Like that's a problem. But I do expect both teams to be contending for the Big 12 this year. They're just more talented than everyone else, but they've also been more talented and they haven't proven in the past couple of years. So we'll see if they get the ship right. But if anyone in the Big 12 or the Pac-12 to make the transition right now, or the ACC, those would be 2 of 4 or 5 teams that I said, okay, you bring them into the SEC right now, they could compete possibly day one.
You're a quarterback, and I know you keep tabs on all these guys. Trevor, probably the last couple of years, best prospect, Bryce and some of these guys, and CJ. would you put Caleb? I mean, for my money, Caleb might be a little more physically gifted than Trevor in terms of probably a little more powerful arm. Obviously, Trevor's going to turn into an excellent NFL player, but I mean, Caleb's got a chance to be one of the best prospects in recent memory.
I mean, Caleb would have been the first player picking off the draft this year. I mean, that's an interesting conversation, though. I mean, if Caleb and Trevor are coming out at the same time, who you taking? And I mean, I'm just such a big fan of Mahomes and what Mahomes has done, and he is, to me, he's Mahomes today. There isn't the work that Andy Reid needs to put into it of, sitting behind Alex Smith for a year, refining his tools and then kind of giving him to the keys to the car the following year. Like, you get Caleb now, he's ready to go. And he does everything you want from a quarterback standpoint of, the arm talent, the accuracy, the escapability, the creativity, the running ability, all that stuff. I mean, he is, I know everyone hates comparisons, but you have to give comps to people because you kind of have to project what they could possibly be at the next level. He's Mahomes, but he's more ready to play in the NFL earlier than Mahomes was. So I would take him. I think he's a better prospect, but I'm with you too. Like, Trevor is a freak, and Trevor had a hell of a year last year, finished off strong. I was with Doug Peterson for 3 years of my career there between Kansas City and Philadelphia. And I can tell you one thing, Doug's going to make sure that that kid continues to get better and better and better and better. But right now, Caleb he's special. I mean, he's special. And, to me, I know Bryce was in a position to go back-to-back Heismans. Caleb's a better prospect than Bryce Young was, and has even more of a legitimate opportunity to go back-to-back when it comes to Heismans.
One thing was clear by the end of the year, right? SC's defense, that they had no business being a playoff team. They couldn't hang with the big dogs. He's landed multiple SEC transfers on defense. Clearly they've, I'm sure, recruited that position. Do you think it's enough time to be competitive with, the top 2 or 3? Could they win the national championship this year?
They could easily win the national championship this year. I don't think you don't need an incredible improvement on defense. I don't think you do. I don't think you need all of a sudden to be, I mean, they're giving up, high 20 points per game, 27, 28, I think somewhere around there. You don't need all of a sudden be giving up 18 points a game to be a national contender. With Caleb at quarterback in that offense and how good they're going to be this year, you just need to be a team that gives up, instead of 28 points per game, gives up 24 points per game. That's it. I mean, you look at their games last year. I mean, their losses were 1-score games. So if you can just get a little bit better, which personnel wise, they're significantly better on defense, which should translate into, points per game. To me, anytime you have a quarterback like Caleb, you're going to have an opportunity to win a national championship. And I'll say this too, even though Georgia has dominated on defense the past 2 years, offenses still win championships. Look at 2 years ago versus Alabama. Alabama beat the living crap out of Georgia in the SEC championship game. Probably would have beat out Georgia once again in the Natty had both receivers been healthy.
Yeah.
Last year, Ohio State probably should have beat Georgia if they're healthy on offense, if both receivers are healthy, if Marvin Harrison doesn't get knocked out. What had to win the game for Georgia? Their offense. Defense can get you there, and it's awesome to have. But if you want to win a championship in today's game, it starts first with the offense. And right now, USC has a championship offense and a defense that just needs to get a little bit better, which they will. So, yeah, they're 100% contenders.
Saban's been saying that now for half a decade, right?
Yeah.
That the game changed.
Yep.
I get a lot of questions from people, Bears fans, Lions fans, Falcons fans, that like, why didn't we just take Jalen Carter? And my take on this is just the Eagles were uniquely set up with older vet legend guys on defense, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, and then kind of that young guys that have played with him to kind of handle the situation. You're a Georgia guy. What was your take on the Jalen Carter just overall situation, and do you think that he went to the right spot?
Well, he went to the right spot for him. I think the biggest thing is the Georgia players. I mean, they have that many guys that were his boys, that he knows and he's comfortable with. If I'm Howie, I'm telling those guys like, hey, you better be taking him to dinner. You better be rooming with him. you better be with him 24/7, and you guys just rotate and essentially be glorified babysitters. So I think for him, it's a perfect spot because he's going to be comfortable to be able to hang out with those guys to, hopefully stay out of trouble and do everything right. But when it comes to just pure talent, he was the most talented player in this draft to me. I mean, he was the best player in the draft. He's a guy that, if you didn't need a quarterback, I'm picking him first. He's instant Aaron Donald, day one, disruptor, takes on two blocks, can win in the run game, can win the pass game. To me, that as a quarterback, that's always the tougher guy. Like I love Will Anderson, but if there's a one technique or a three technique that can get after the quarterback and put pressure in my face, that is so much harder than a defensive end coming off the edge. So much harder. So best player, most gifted player in the draft. If that incident didn't happen with the crash, I think he goes higher. But I think for his sake, this was the best situation for him to go to the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, and when you say Nakobe Dean and Nolan Smith are like captain level high character, that's pretty uniquely suited for him. I don't think people probably listening quite understand this. In college, it's like, how do guys that leave the Alabama's program then get in trouble in the pros? Or, it's like, well, actually, it's easier to control in college than once you get to the pros. You have a lot more time. And I guess with NIL, it's changed a little bit, but you got a lot more money, especially.
Well, you're also not living in that town either. I mean, most NFL guys, as soon as the season's over with, they're on the next flight the next day to go back home. Yeah. There's not that controlled environment where you go to Georgia or you go to Alabama. You usually have a guy who is in charge of making sure everyone kind of is doing, what is right on and off the field. And you're in small college towns most of the time. So it's a little bit easier to manage. Now, obviously, Georgia's struggling a little bit with these kids wanting to be NASCAR drivers, and that's a bit of a problem right now. But you can usually handle it a little bit easier. But then you do have the problem of they are 18 to 22-year-olds that are still physically and mentally maturing, and they're going to make a lot more mistakes than a guy that's, I would say the majority of guys that are in the NFL that are 5+ years in, a lot of them are married, they have kids, they got responsibilities. Like they're not going crazy, and obviously they're a little bit more mentally and physically mature. So it's kind of however you view it. But it is, like you said, it is a little bit easier to control when you're in a small college town.
You mentioned it when you got drafted, you went to a place that had Andy Reid, Alex Smith, Doug Peterson, and Matt Nagy. What was just first impressions getting to the Chiefs? What was that experience like?
It was awesome. And I remember my first meeting because we also had Chase Daniel, who, one of the greatest backups in NFL history when it comes to money. He's just done a hell of a job. But I remember walking into that room and seeing all those just powerful minds that just know the game. And I remember they were talking about plays, and I sat down and they're going through certain plays, and I'm like, they're just messing with me. Like it sounded like I'm trying to learn Mandarin right now. It sounded like Mandarin to me. And I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? Like I thought it was like some rookie hazing. We're just joking with a young kid. And I open up the playbook and it's legit. I mean, it's old school West. I mean, it's true West Coast offense where plays are 15 to like 25 words long. And that was a really hard part for me. But the way that Coach Reid kind of broke down the plays and why he was calling the plays and kind of how the offense changed. I mean, today's game nowadays, which is incredible, I love it, really goes through the tight end a lot of times. You see it in the NFL, you see it in college, and it's all about matchups. It's how can we move our chess pieces around to get the best matchup. And I remember my rookie year was Travis's first year to play, the year before he was hurt, and seeing how Coach Reid moved him around the offense, seeing how Coach Reid moved Jamal Charles around the offense. I mean, we had the first time in NFL history, 0 touchdowns, receiving touchdowns from a receiver. But we would flex Kelsey out. We would move Jamal to receiver. I mean, Jamal ran a bench route as a receiver and caught it for a touchdown. Yet our receivers didn't do that. But Andy Reid knew if I put Jamal in this situation, he would have the better matchup to be able to run this route, get open, catch, and score a touchdown. Things like that, which I just never thought. I was like, running back plays running back, tight end plays tight end, not running back goes out and plays receiver, tight end goes plays receiver, tight ends in the backfield. Like stuff like that to me just really opened my eyes up to what the potential of offenses can be. And now we're seeing more and more of it at all levels of football.
What was Andy like from a player's perspective in the meetings with the quarterbacks?
Hilarious, always joking, always getting after us about something, and always hell of stories. I mean, like we would have our post-practice meetings, which would end 5:30, and that would always he would come into those meetings with us, with the quarterbacks, and ended up being, he would tell us like a 20-30 minute story after that of something from like back in the day at Green Bay or Philly. And it was just always really cool to hear that. I was always joking with guys during installs, had a fun way to, because it gets monotonous, man. You're installing a lot of times very similar plays over and over and over again. And every time he'd find some new little funny twist on it to get guys to pay attention, to grab one more little nugget about the offense, which was his specialty. But man, he was awesome to be around. It's good. And Nagy was the same way. And so was Doug.
How about Alex? Obviously his career, you were seeing the career renaissance of a guy who's seen some low moments, just being around him on a daily basis. What was Alex like?
He was like a big brother. It was funny because Chase and Alex are very different, and I both of them are great, and I got great relationships with them. But Alex was, so secure for a guy that you allude to had such ups and downs to start his career. I mean, 4 offensive coordinators and 4 head coaches in his first 4 years. He was like 20 years old when he got drafted. Obviously, all the back and forth between him and Rodgers and all that stuff. But to be so secure with who he was and what he was doing in his process, and to never feel threatened. He was always there to give advice and give help and break down plays for me. Was just so awesome to me. And Chase was the same way. Chase is so damn smart. But Chase would haze the shit out of me. I mean, just absolute haze me. Especially my rookie year with, having to do, pick up shoulder pads and pick up donuts and this and that and the other. But both were awesome to be around.
People often ask me, like, why is Andy such a better offensive coach than like 99% of people? Is it just beside the crazy stuff that now Mahomes does? Even back when were you at the game when Jamal Charles had like the 3 against the Raiders screen passes?
5 touchdowns. Oh yeah, that was the year before. Yeah, 5. I think he had like 4 or 5 total, and then like the 3 screens. Yeah.
It was just like, why do you think Coach Reid is such a good offensive play caller / schemer?
I mean, it goes back, I think it's because of what I talked about before. Like, he's not afraid to put guys in different positions. I mean, to tell a guy like Jamal, like, hey, man, you're going to flex around and you're going to move around. Like, you may have just played running back at Texas your whole life, but you're going to play a little receiver. And Kelsey, you're like, he just thinks outside the box. And another fun thing is, we would be in morning meetings, and he would show up like at 7. Not he'd already be there in the facility, but he'd walk into our meeting. And he'd have like a napkin of dribbled up plays, and he'd like look at us. He says, "What do you guys think of this?" He said, "I woke up last night and just thought of this and just wrote it down." Like, he'd have like just random 7-Eleven napkins by his bed or in his office where he would just jot down ideas. And I think that, man, it just really pushing the limits of what each player can do. And then when you give that player that responsibility, I think guys like that more. They like to be, to know that, hey, Coach Reid views me as not just this, but this, and this, and this, and this is how I can better the offense. And I think that helps guys take their game to another level as well. So not only is it the schematics, but it's getting the most out of the players.
Okay, I'll get you out of here on this. Hypothetically speaking, would you rather go NIL money, pay taxes, or get the large brown bags, no taxes? Hypothetically speaking.
I mean, is there a difference in the money? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Well, you got to factor in the taxes. Yeah, I mean, similar for quarterbacks. You guys now. I mean, I don't know if brown.
I mean, for a quarterback, I mean, NIL.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would.
Have you ever
probably
thought
go
about
NIL,
like what you would have done? Let's just say
yeah,
$500,000. At 19 years
half a
old.
million dollars of brown bag money. Like the problem with that
Oh,
is, yeah,
that's a no brainer.
well, no, I don't know if it's a brainer. I mean, how are you going to clean that cash? I mean, are we going to
That's
have to
true.
go? Are we going to have to go
But you
Ozark
guys don't have to
style
pay
and
for
go buy a
cars or food
bar?
or anything. You just pocket
Yeah, but
money.
what am I going to do with $500,000 in cash? I'm going to stuff it under my bed
Buy
in my dorm
clothes.
room.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that just to me that sounds stressful, and I'll end up getting like arrested because I'll put it all in my bank account, and then all of a sudden I get a knock on the door like, where'd all this $500,000 come from? And you haven't reported any of it. So I've watched too many Ozarks and stuff like that. I mean,
That's true. That's true. That's true.
I have to find a way to clean it. So it's
The
stressing me
stories on
out.
the
So give me that aisle.
the stories on these NIL, I mean, you're living it around these guys, hearing these stories, calling the. Is it a little overblown? Not necessarily for like a
It's
Caleb, but just the
way
average.
overblown.
Is everyone
Yes.
making $375,000?
Yep. Yep. It is so overblown. It is your superstars. It's top recruits because of these collectives. These collectives are putting together pretty lucrative packages for some of these recruits.
Like a
I
down
just don't know.
payment to buy, like to get the guy, or do I sign a deal over the course of his career? How
You
does
sign
that
a
work?
deal over you sign like essentially a deal. I just don't know how long like that's gonna last because A&M just dealt with this. You get this incredible recruiting class. Guys are smoking weed in the locker room. Guys, half that class is gone. So
That
like
was my favorite.
you're
That was
telling
my
me,
favorite SEC story in 2022. Dude smoking
yeah,
weed in the locker room.
I'm like, if I'm a booster and I just wrote a check for 100K and that's what I just paid for, don't think that I'm going to write another check for 100K next year. That model is so unsustainable and not what NIL was intended for. And at some point, the market's going to correct itself a little bit. It's a mess right now, so we'll see. But I will say, like what you said, everyone ain't getting paid. That's for sure. There's definitely we got our haves and we got our have-nots.
Would you say that's
Just
the
like the
number one
NFL,
thing?
though. That's
Yeah,
like the
that's true.
NFL marketing. I mean, it's the big boys are getting paid. Obviously you got a salary cap, so it's not that big of a deal. I mean, guys are still getting paid, but offensive linemen aren't getting $2 million, $3 million in marketing money. They're getting their base salary, they're getting their Madden check, and that's about it.
When you go to one of these spring games or you call a game, the number one thing the assistant coaches are complaining about is dealing with NIL and transfer guys.
Yeah.
Not even close,
24/7,
right?
man.
Yeah.
24/7. It's I hope the market corrects itself a little bit and it goes to what it was intended for, which was you ball out and
Take
Waffle
care.
House wants to give you a deal, then you get a deal with Waffle House or Nike or Gatorade, not, hey, we want to go incentivize this kid out of high school who's never played college football to come to our university. We're going to offer him $13 million, like the whole Jaden Rashada thing. Like it's stupid.
Is that guy even good?
I guess you'll find out being there in Arizona. You'll find out soon.
Well, like 2 years ago, I was living in the Bay Area and he was right down the street, kind of close to where Najee
Yeah.
Harris had played high school football. And he was kind of a late, Najee, people knew about him when he was like 10.
Yeah.
This guy was kind of a late bloomer. And then it just kind of took off like a wildfire. And then all of a sudden he's being offered $15 million from Florida Collective like that. No, this is not happening. That feels kind of like a seminal moment in this whole thing where people are like, this is, or is that not, maybe
He's
not?
like that. He's not even. I don't know if he's somewhere on he was around that number 10 mark for quarterbacks. I mean, he was going to get paid more than all these other quarterbacks that were, projected a lot higher than him. It made no sense. It got to be some battle between, I believe, them and Miami, and just number got getting bid up and bid up and bid up, and
Yeah,
obviously got a little bit too out of control. So I don't know. To me, I think, like I said, at some point boosters are going to be like, no mas. Like we can't just keep funding these kids.
What do you got on tap the rest of the week? 9 at Augusta maybe later this week, or what does a guy, former quarterback in Georgia, do?
Try and golf as much as I can, as long as the wife lets me. We got 2 kids now, which is a little bit tough. And daily show and snaps, baby. So if you need a good college football show, we got our brand new channel now. So make sure you check it out on YouTube, youtube.com/@ volume snaps. It's myself and T-Bob. So we have a lot of fun. We're kind of chatting up before this show right now. And T-Bob is one of the best characters in all of college sports. So we have a good time.
absolutely. You would not know. You just think he was like a radio performer. He also played football at LSU. You know, it's not like
highest ranked player on NCAA his senior year for LSU.
What was his number?
I think it's been in the 90s, somewhere in the 90s.
Now, because, you former athletes complain nonstop the game may never come back. Everyone's bitching that they're only getting $500 or something. I saw a headline.
So stupid.
Like, who cares? Yeah, there's 7 million players. What do you think? Every guy's going to get $7,000?
Take your money, be in the game, and be happy. It's just that's some agency that's trying to make a name for itself and put players together and tell them that they're getting ripped off. Is it a great deal for you? Probably not. Who gives a crap? Just sign your name and you're going to be on the game. And guess what? NCAA, the game was great without you. And I guarantee you they'll move forward without you too. People don't care. The number one mode in NCAA is dynasty mode, which you're out of dynasty mode after 2 years anyways. So they'll be happy just to go on with the game even without you. So don't be an idiot.
Well, Aaron, thanks for coming on, bro. Have a good rest of the summer. I know you guys in the South, you go to the shore, you go to here, and weather's good down there. Your ocean's about 80 degrees. This isn't the Pacific Ocean out here, but you got some sharks and alligators. You got a lot of critters down there.
Yeah, we'll have a good time. Well, appreciate you having me on today.
Take it easy, man.